Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. And today we've got a show focused on the outfield, focused on the one position group that the Rockies have that can actually make a difference, both obviously on the field, but also with the ability to make trades. Because we've mentioned it before, the Rockies don't have a ton of trade assets. They have a few guys here and there, and especially when you look beyond the outfield, you might have a couple relievers, maybe a starting pitcher that you're able to deal. But besides that, you don't necessarily have the assets on this team. So for the Colorado Rockies, they actually have an outfield with depth, which is hard to believe for a team that struggled as much as the Rockies did last year. Now, when it comes to guys who are actually going to be most available in terms of trading, that will differ based on, I guess, who you talk to. One name for sure, though, that I don't expect to see get dealt unless value goes up is Brenton Doyle, right? There were reports, hey, Doyle could be on the trade block. Hey, Doyle could be a name we see dealt. But the Rockies are now pretty firm that they're not going to trade Brenton Doyle. And I think that makes sense right now because his value is probably at its lowest of low just due to the season he had last year. I think we all expect a bounce back next year for Doyle. But right now, why would you sell low if you're Colorado? That is a decision that would make no sense. So to hold firm is absolutely the right decision. So now you've got the rest of the outfield, which is obviously Jordan Beck, Tyler Freeman, Yanquiel Fernandez, Zach Veen, and Mickey Moniak. Those are the other names that we're looking at in terms of potential trades. I think of that group, Moniak and Tyler Freeman are the most likely to be dealt. Freeman is who they got in the Nolan Jones trade, right? And that actually worked out great for Colorado. So you could see Freeman. And then Moniak, who we've talked about now the last couple of shows, has had a great revival with Colorado. He had his best hitting season just last year. The problem is defensively he's struggled. So there are ups and downs with these kind of players. And then the rest are just younger guys. We'll talk about Zach Veen a little bit later in this show, but for Fernandez and Veen, they were both big prospects for the Rockies. Haven't necessarily lived up to the expectations we've had for them. And then, of course, there's Jordan Beck, who's obviously a little bit younger, could be an interesting target for some teams. So I think Beck is also, an option for a trade in terms of likely to most unlikely. Doyle's going to be on one end of that equation, right? Or spectrum, I should say, where he's probably not going to be dealt unless that value goes up or the Rockies get a really good offer for him. But on the other end, for Freeman and Moniak, those are two names that you could see getting dealt. And so let's talk about Tyler Freeman. We've talked about Moniak, so I think now's the time to talk about Tyler Freeman as a potential trade target. And, there was an interesting article put out by Clutchpoint that listed actually a potential trade for the Rockies and Freeman, and where he would be actually going to the San Francisco Giants in exchange for Carson Seymour and Kai Tang. Now, the two things to know about these pitchers is Seymour is a ground ball pitcher, so he'd actually do pretty well at Coors. I say should do pretty well, right? He had a just under 5 ERA. Both of these pitchers aren't Cy Young candidates. You would be taking a chance on two pitchers. However, Seymour just made his MLB debut last year. He has a sinker that could be very beneficial. And for Tang, he just has high velocity or high rotation on his pitches, or a high spin rate. So it's the opportunity to trade an outfielder for two guys who are MLB ready, who both pitched at the major league level last year. And I think that's a trade that the Rockies have to consider. And maybe it's not this specifically, but those are the type of returns you should expect for a deal for Freeman or for Moniak, right? You're not going to get this great package of a guy who's got a 280 RA and 150 strikeout type of pitcher, but on guys who are MLB ready that could make a difference for your rotation. And that has to be somewhat substantial for Colorado just because of how limited their rotation is right now. They only have a couple of guys that are truly MLB ready, but they're going to have more pitchers just because they have to in that rotation. So for a trade like this, you would probably see Seymour slotted in at that number 3 or number 4 spot for the Rockies. And then for Kai Tang, it would just be a matter of can he pitch at Coors, which is obviously a risk. But it's not a back-breaking trade either way if the pitchers don't work out. Tyler Freeman is a serviceable player. Obviously played decent enough for the Rockies last year. But if you can flip a guy like that for a couple of starting pitchers, has to be considered. But again, this is just one idea, one theory, one potential trade route that the Rockies could make. And for Colorado, you have to expect something to be done. Paul DePodesta has even come out and said that they want to try to improve this starting rotation. It was kind of just a blanket statement of like, hey, we know this rotation, not good. But we're still waiting to actually see something be done. And the reason we mention through trades is the Rockies just don't sign starting pitching. I think they've had like 3 or 4 pitchers since 21 signing with the Colorado Rockies at a major league level contract. That's peanuts. That's not much at all. And it makes sense. We've talked about it at length. Starting pitchers just are not likely to sign here. Especially pitchers in the prime of their career, because it's just really difficult to pitch at Coors Field. And obviously the other factor right now, the Rockies aren't good. So, oh great, I can tank my value by going to Colorado, where a bunch of my stats are going to skyrocket, and I'm pitching for a team that doesn't have a chance at competing right now. The equation just won't add up, right? You're trying to get to a proper solution, and you just can't. And that's just going to be how it is for the time being. So the Rockies have to do it through trades, or what they did with Brebbia is sign these guys to minor league contracts and hopefully find a little life there. But their best avenue to improve starting pitching will be through the trade market, and it will be done by trading one of these outfielders. It's just a matter of who. This is an example of Tyler Freeman, but it could be any of the guys that I listed in that first segment. But obviously we talk about Freeman today, who we haven't really talked about much on this show, as a potential target, right? But let's talk about another outfielder, and that's Zach Veen. I don't expect Zach Veen right now to be dealt. One, because his value is just probably pretty darn low, which is obviously a bummer because Veen was the number 1 prospect for the Rockies for quite some time. There was a lot of hype and expectations, and there's still some expectations for Veen, but this is an important season for him in 2026. He's still young. He can still have leaps and bounds of success, but it has to start this season. He's going to get the opportunity, but in 2025, he had 34 at-bats, 4 hits, 1 home run, 1 double. Just not productive at the plate. He's obviously dealt with injuries, but it has not been the experience that the Rockies were expecting for Zach Veen. This is a guy with a ton of pop in his bat, and the Rockies need that in their lineup, but they also need him to perform at a major league level, and he just didn't do that last year. And that isn't just on Veen. That's something we saw for a lot of guys in this lineup, which is obvious, right? They failed to hit 50 wins, so they obviously have a lot of struggles across the board. But Veen is a guy who's going to get opportunity this year, especially if we see a trade for one of these other outfielders. So that's kind of the hope, right? Is the Rockies can flip one of these outfielders, get some pitching prospects, or get some major league ready players, and then you give Fernandez and Veen opportunities to play, because that is going to be more of what we see in 2026. is this front office figuring out what they actually have at their disposal. And it would be a huge, huge, huge plus if Zach Veen can actually evolve into something for the Rockies. Because then it turns into that cycle again where if he gets his value up and is playing well, then you can be put in a good, tough situation where, hey, we want this guy to be an everyday starter, which means you bump one of the starting outfielders, right? Or he's got great trade value and you can flip him because he is a younger player. And so if a younger player's playing well, the Rockies will most likely probably stick with that guy. And I think a lot of us would love to see Veen just be a Rocky and have a lot of success. But if he's playing great and it's, hey, we can get a great return, you have to consider that as well. And so that is a hope for Zach Veen in 2026, that he can put the Rockies in an uncomfortable situation, a good uncomfortable situation where, hey, we've got 3 guys in the outfield. We're going to have to move one of them in terms of they're not going to start anymore. Or, hey, we're going to have to make a trade, or we're going to have to do something. That's how you improve this team, is you develop some of these younger guys. And Zach Veen is one of the many that is younger, that has underperformed, but has an opportunity to flip that around in 2026. 26 is definitely going to be a year of just development for a lot of these guys, and the Rockies figuring out who they can trust and who they need to move on from. And Veen, he isn't too far gone, right? He's still got time. But if he has a bad 2026, the Rockies could look at that and say, hey, we need to find someone else. So pretty critical year for Zach Veen moving into 26, where the Rockies probably aren't going to be great again, right? They're probably going to be bad again. So obviously take advantage of the things you can take advantage of, and that's 26. Take advantage of these younger guys and hopefully see them improve and play well. Finally, let's talk about having patience, right? Let's talk about finding our inner zen, and that's patience for our front office. New front office. I think there was this high of all these different signings of different coaches and GMs and executives. But now we're at this point in the offseason where those moves are done for right now. And we know there's a ton of work being done behind the scenes. But the splashy moves and everything like that, we're just kind of sitting here waiting. And it is important to have patience for a front office that has a lot of work ahead. They have a lot of things that they need to restructure and change. But that being said, and we've noted it, it would be nice to see something. See a little life, right? And obviously, Dave Podesta has come out and said, hey, we want starting pitching, right? Well, it would be one step nicer would be, hey, let's go and get a starting pitcher. Let's see a free agent signing for our first baseman or someone in the infield. Let's see a trade made. And so the patience is important in all of this, because we all know this is going to probably be another painful season. Not a season full of joy, but a season probably full of grief. But we still want to see something, anything by spring training, right? Doesn't need to be a giant move, but you just don't want to be in those categories of, hey, the Rockies are one of 2 teams who haven't signed a major league player. Okay, that's interesting. I'm sure they've made some big trades. No big trades. A small one here and there, but nothing of anyone who's actually going to be playing in 26. Oh, okay, yeah. No, that's exactly what we want, right? No, the Rockies do need to show the fans a little bit of life, because I think most fans understand there's rebuilding being done behind the scenes, but you also want to see something in front of you. And so that's kind of this balance that I think us fans need to have, but also holding front offices accountable. Because it's one thing to make these hires and be like, man, this is going to be awesome in 5 years. But it's another to actually just see some actions based on what we've seen in the past. And I think that's the biggest thing for Rockies fans, is we we haven't seen anything from front offices. We've been mainly just burned by front offices and the decisions that they've made. And so I think a sign of trust would be doing something this offseason that fans can say, all right, this front office is working. What does that look like? It really could be something as simple as just signing a middle infielder or someone who's major league ready, or getting someone like Nick Castellanos who should cost peanuts, right? Like he should not cost you really anything. Those are the kind of things I think fans want to see. Not an expectation that you're gonna get a bunch of all-stars or anything like that. That's obviously no one's expectations, but to just see some movement. But until then, I think you'll start to see maybe a little bit of growing impatience, not by the masses, but just by fans who are tired of seeing really bad baseball with no actions being made. And I think a step in the right direction is simple actions being made so that the Rockies fans, us fans, can build up trust again in an organization that's really just only burned us outside a few occasions. But until then, we're just going to have to wait and see. We're now, under 2 months of players reporting, right? And so we'll see. There's still time, but we want to see some action. But until then, I'm Scott Ayers. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to share, hit that like button, subscribe, share with your mom, your dad, uncle, aunt, nieces, nephews, you name it. But until tomorrow, I will see you. Have a great day.